Hello and welcome viewers, this is Fana Broadcasting Corporate. This special edition is coming to you in connection with the 125th anniversary of the diplomatic relationship between Russia and Ethiopia. I have a guest. My guest is Ambassador of Russian Federation to Ethiopia, Evgeny Tarahin. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for joining me. Let's start our conversation with the progress in the diplomatic relationship between Russia and Ethiopia. How do you see the progress?
Thank you very much for this meeting and for your kind agreement to arrange a special report on the 125th anniversary of our diplomatic relations. Really, it is a very remarkable anniversary. Ethiopia is one of Russia's key partners in Africa, and our diplomatic relations were established 125 years ago. That means in 1898. That was just a couple of years after the tremendous and historical victory of Ethiopian people during Adwa battle. Our diplomatic relations since that time has passed a long and very great journey. We have managed to establish our cooperation in a wide range of activities and in a wide range of spheres. Sometimes this journey was not easy at all. For instance, after the revolution in Russia in 1917, especially after the Russian emperor's family was executed in our country, the Ethiopian emperor's government decided to severe relations with our country, but this did not take a long time. Although our diplomatic relations were interrupted when Ethiopia fell victim of a new Italian aggression. The former Soviet Union was the first country to raise its voice in defense of Ethiopia. As we remember, at that time Ethiopia was attacked by a fascist regime, a fascist country, and it was the first country which was occupied by a fascist regime. But at the same time, Ethiopia managed to become the first country to get liberated and to get rid of occupants. At the same time, the Soviet Union has made the decisive effort to break backbone of fascism and Nazism. So it is possible to say that both our countries were in the same trenches, were on the one side of barricades in the world's people's struggle against this brown plague. After the Second World War, our diplomatic relations and state relations have met a new pace. They started first of all steadily developing in political sphere. The both countries were among the founders of the United Nations organization and the United Nations system as a whole. At the end of 50s, namely in 1959, Emperor Haile Selassie I paid his first visit to our country, and this visit laid a good basis for the development of our relations in other spheres. Many important agreements were signed in different spheres of cooperation, especially in economical sphere. In accordance with these agreements, refinery factory, oil refinery factory in Asab was built. Bahar Dar Polytechnic Institute was built and presented to Ethiopia as a gift of the Soviet people to Ethiopian people. Many other projects were put into deeds, and as well first Ethiopian students came to our country to get education in our universities. Well, after that, after the demise of emperor's regime in Ethiopia, our bilateral relations have received a new impetus, which was based on ideological closeness between the leaders of the two countries. At that time, as well, our country has helped and made a good deal in strengthening Ethiopian defense capability, and at the same time economic cooperation was further widened. On this basis, Melkovakena hydroelectric power plant was built. A number of vocational training schools in different corners of the country were established. Thousands and thousands of Ethiopian students started and got education in our country. In general, we count their number between 23 to 27,000 citizens of Ethiopia who received higher education in our country. The fact that we can't name the precise number of these students itself speaks for the great scale of this cooperation. After in 1991, great changes took place in both our countries. The military regime was changed in Ethiopia, new forces came to power, and at the same time the Soviet Union has fallen and was disbanded. So at that time both our countries were mainly concentrated on deciding on solving their internal problems, and that's why our cooperation for a certain time was not frozen, but it was low in scale. But even though it didn't take a long time, and starting from the new century, step by step, our relationship became being restored and strengthened once again. And at that time, we are happy to notice a high level of political contacts between our two countries. Of course, the main basis for these contacts, for political cooperation, is led by the two leaders of our countries, by Prime Minister Dr. Abiy and President Mr. Putin, who have made a personal meeting during the first Russia-Ethiopian summit in Sochi in 2019. They have discussed quite a whole range of our cooperation in all spheres. Nowadays, we're developing different modalities of our cooperation, not only in political sphere, not only diplomatic, but as well, as I said, political. For instance, the two ruling parties of our countries have established close cooperation. They signed a memorandum of understanding. We have established very good and close ties between the parliaments of our countries. For instance, last month in March, high-level delegation of the House of People's Representatives of Ethiopian Parliament has participated in the second interparliamentary Russia-African conference in Moscow. So we are moving forward, and this is a great result, I should stress.
Ethiopia and Russia are now set to celebrate the 125th anniversary of the diplomatic relationship. What are the major achievements gained in these 125 years?
I think that maybe the best achievement of our diplomatic relations during the last 125 years is the higher level stage of cordial relationships between our two countries. Indifferent of what governments were in our both countries, the relationship between our two peoples were growing steadily during all these 125 years. These relationships are based on mutual trust, mutual esteem, and real fraternal friendship and sympathy. I think this is the main result.
Russia opened the AFROCOM office in Addis with a view to boost the trade and economic ties between Ethiopia and Russia, and between Russia and Africa at large. Is there any progress in terms of just expanding these trade ties?
Exactly. Last January, in January 2022, a representative office of AFROCOM was established in Addis Ababa. First of all, what is AFROCOM? AFROCOM is a body which is established within this framework and structure of the Russian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Its main task is to promote economic cooperation and trade between the two countries, and first of all to help the businesses of two countries to establish closer contacts. AFROCOM has already undertaken certain steps to make higher level of awareness of Russian businesses about trade and economic cooperation opportunities with Ethiopia. As far as I know, AFROCOM has also facilitated visits of a number of Russian companies representatives to Ethiopia, and as well of a number of Ethiopian businessmen to Russia. Also, as they have informed me, they are planning to participate in the forthcoming investment conference organized by Ethiopian Investment Commission in Addis Ababa at the end of this month, in April this year.
Ethiopia and Russia also have so far signed various agreements to boost their cooperation in the science and technology sectors. What are the progresses in this regard?
Really, cooperation in the sphere of science and technology has a very wide perspective. And I'm happy that our cooperation in this field is developing in the most sophisticated areas, such as space studies, exploration and use, peaceful use of nuclear energy, biology. For instance, we have had for almost 40 years a joint Soviet, after that a joint Russian-Ethiopian biological expedition, which was active here starting from 1987. During these years, with the scientists of the two countries who were together working within the framework of this expedition, have made an unmeasurable contribution to fundamental science and a number of applied national economic projects. Our common wish is to support these studies, and under the initiative which was put forward by Prime Minister Dr. Abiy, there is a principled decision to establish a joint permanent joint institute of biological studies in Ethiopia. These days, appropriate draft agreement between the two countries is being finalized, and we are hoping that it will be signed very soon. On the other hand, let us take such an area as space research. A couple of years ago, a special memorandum of cooperation was signed between Ethiopian Space Science Institute and the Russian Institute of Applied Mathematics, named after Keldysh. In accordance with this agreement, an observatory is being constructed on Antota Mountain, and we hope to inaugurate it also very soon. This observatory will help to use the Russian-made telescope which will be installed there to explore different objects in the outer space. In general, we have three different projects with the Ethiopian Institute of Science, of Space Science, and this is another good example of our cooperation in this field. And finally, let me remind of the cooperation in the sphere of peaceful use of nuclear energy. Special intergovernmental agreement was signed on the sidelines of the first Russia-Africa summit in 2019. In accordance with this agreement, a roadmap of cooperation in this field was also adopted, and now we are turning to practical steps in this area. Usually, when nuclear energy and use of nuclear energy in peaceful aims is mentioned, people are usually thinking about nuclear power plants. But this area is not limited to energy sector only. It gives good opportunities for further development of medicine, of agriculture, and many other spheres of our day-to-day life. So I'm sure that being now Ethiopia, being a member of nuclear club, will be able to use the results of these explorations in this nuclear sphere. for the benefit of country's development and for the benefit of people's development, of people of Ethiopia development.
It's obvious that Ethiopia and Russia have many things in common, and you have stated that. What are the activities being undertaken to boost the people-to-people ties and cultural cooperation between these two countries?
I think that people-to-people relations as well are not limited to cultural contacts only. We have, in my understanding, a much wider scope. For instance, we have Dajaz Balchi Hospital in Addis Ababa, which has been operating here since 1947. And even more, its roots, let me say, go far back into history to 1896, when the first medical team came here after Battle of Edo to help wounded and sick Ethiopian patriots who struggled against colonialists. So this hospital is, while rendering medical assistance to thousands and thousands of Ethiopian citizens, is making its own contribution for the development of people-to-people relations. And I'm happy that quite recently we have signed a new agreement on the prolongation of its activities here for another 25 years. Well, as for the cultural sector, we are doing what we can. For instance, in November last year, we have received here an artistic group from Russia, which was on African tour and staged here a special cultural event. Also, we are hoping to meet here soon another chorus, male chorus of one of Russian monasteries, which will be able to acquaint Ethiopian public with the spiritual music of our country. I think it should be interesting to many people, since our two Christian religions are very close. Now we are working on inviting a group of Ethiopian artists to come to Russia during the Russia-Africa Summit to present the arts to participants of this event.
Thousands of Ethiopians who attended their higher education in universities of Russia are now serving their country at several positions. Is there any progress in terms of enhancing the education cooperation between the two countries?
Previously, we have educated from 23 to 27,000 of Ethiopian students in our country. After 1991, due to the reasons I have already mentioned, this cooperation was gradually reduced. At that time, in 90s, we have accepted maybe 10, 12 students per year only. But we have managed to reverse this negative tendency. And first, we have managed to accept up to 30 Ethiopian students per year. And starting from this year, from the current year, we have found the possibility to enlarge this quota up to 100 places per year. And I hope that in the next year we'll follow the same good tendency of enlargement of this quota. Of course, maybe at present day it's not as much as it was previously, but still we are reviving with cooperation. My another task is to help Ethiopian and Russian universities, or in other words, establishments of higher education, to establish direct academic relations, which can be of multifaceted character. It embraces student exchanges, teachers exchanges, short-term or long-term practices. So we are working on that. I have already visited quite a number of different Ethiopian universities, and I'm trying to find partner universities for them in our country.
What's your comment on the latest developments in Ethiopia in terms of the peace agreement reached between the federal government and the TPLF?
Peace is very essential for normal development of any country, of any people. Of course, especially since Ethiopia and Ethiopian people are very close to us, since we are considering Ethiopian people as a brotherly people, we were very much annoyed by the problems which took place in your country during recent times. And we're happy that your government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Dr. Abiy, managed to find a way for the solution of this problem. Of course, we absolutely support all the attempts made to establish peace and security in your country, and we are wishing you all the best success in this endeavor.
What are the major outcomes expected to be gained from the second Russia-Africa summit?
Let me first go a few years back. As you well know, Russia, former Soviet Union, after that Russia, we have always been on the side of African peoples and African countries. After the Second World War, when the United Nations system was established, Soviet Union was in the vanguard of the forces which were demanding liberation of African countries from the yoke of colonialism. After these countries got freedom, our country was in the vanguard of those who were helping these newly born countries build their national economy, their statehood, establish their systems of health care, education, etc. And this is admitted by everybody. Unfortunately, after 1991, since our country was deeply sunk into its own internal problems, our relationship with Africa, relations between our country and Africa were really gradually weakened. And even many people started saying that Russia has left Africa. I can't say that I absolutely agree with this saying, but reality is reality. Our presence in Africa was almost zero level. But since we have started restoring our relationship with Africa, the things are returning to their proper places. And in 2019, as I have mentioned, we have managed to conduct the first Russia-Africa summit, which became the turning point in our relationship with the continent. At that forum, many people have said, Russia returned to Africa, and it is really what we can see. At the same time, it is worthwhile to note that the first summit had more political and symbolical meaning of the Russian return to Africa. But now we have to capitalize our political gains into our gains in the spheres of economy, in the sphere of humanitarian cooperation, and cultural cooperation. And that's why the forthcoming second summit of Russia with Africa, besides its political meaning, will also pay a great attention to these three spheres: economic, humanitarian, cultural and educational cooperation. This will be the peculiar point of the forthcoming event.
Are there any possibilities to bring an end to Russia's operation in Ukraine? Are there any possibilities to bring an end to peaceful mechanism?
Let us look at this question from a little bit different angle. Many sources, many outlets, and especially Western, are speaking about so-called Russian-Ukrainian war, or at minimum Russian-Ukrainian conflict, which have started in February last year. It's not true. It's not true. In fact, this conflict was initiated by the illegal, absolutely illegal coup d'etat, which was arranged by nationalistic, ultra-nationalistic and neo-Nazi forces in Ukraine in 2014. And these forces were supported by most of the Western powers. This coup d'etat turned to be a logical development and a logical continuation what was developing in Europe starting from 1991 after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Starting from the very beginning, and even earlier when the two Germanies were reunited, our country, at that time President Gorbachev, insisted that joint Germany shouldn't be a member of NATO. NATO should not enlarge to the east. And everybody, President Bush, State Secretary Baker, and after that Schulz and the others, they said, no problem. Sleep quietly, be calm, be happy. But what we have seen in practice, stage by stage, in several stages, NATO bloc was approaching our national borders. Initially, NATO was established and pronounced to be a defensive bloc. But from whom they are going to defend us at our border? And how can we trust them? And we have insisted that Ukraine should, under no condition, should become member of NATO bloc, and should not participate in its joint drillings, exercises, and so on. But we have quite opposite tendencies. And when, in any case, more or less, Ukrainian government has managed to maintain more or less, to a certain extent, a more or less neutral position. And until beginning of 2014, when this coup d'etat happened. And what were the first steps of the new forces which seized the power? They started oppressing Russian-speaking population of their own country, their own citizens. They started forbidding Russian language use. They started forbidding Russian culture in their own country. But 40%, at least 40% of this country population was considering itself to be Russian or Russian-speaking. Almost 80% of the country were bilingual, speaking equally Russian and Ukrainian. So we couldn't just look at this and keep silent. But moreover, what has happened in Kiev itself, where more than 100 of people were killed during this coup d'etat, just in a short time was repeated in the city of Odessa, where dozens of people were burnt and killed by Nazis in one accident only. And after that, these ultra-nationalist detachments, armed detachment, they moved towards eastern parts of the country, Donetsk, Lugansk, and to Crimea. In Crimea, the native population of this country managed to defend itself from these invaders. They stopped them and turned back. And after that, it was not an annexation of Crimea by Russia and Federation, as the Westerners said, but it was an expression of 96–98% of the population of the Crimea population, which was expressed during the referendum. In eastern parts of Ukraine, the situation has taken another development. Some regions of Donetsk and Lugansk regions proclaimed their own republics, independent from Ukraine. I am not going to go into, I wouldn't like to go into legal details of the decision, but even though, although they are called by Kiev as secessionists, even though it was possible to get a peaceful solution to this problem within the borders of unified Ukraine. Different negotiations were undertaken, and finally Minsk agreements were signed. And it was Kiev's turn to fulfill these agreements if they really wanted a peaceful solution with the people of eastern parts of their own country. But they did nothing to put these agreements into practical deeds. Moreover, they were using any possible pretext to accuse Russia of allegedly violating these agreements, but Russia wasn't even a party to this agreement. And in the meantime, they were bombing, they were shelling peaceful cities of eastern Donbass and Lugansk regions. More than 13,000 people died there in the period of 8 years under the bombs and shells from the Ukrainian army. And nobody in Western Europe or in America noticed these facts. Nobody have accused Kiev of genocide, because genocide is extermination of certain people on the basis of its nationality, faith, or something of that kind. So the peaceful people, inhabitants of Donetsk and Lugansk were exterminated, were killed just on one basis, because they were native Russians. And what is more hypocritical, and it was admitted by former President of France Hollande, from former Chancellor of Germany Merkel, and even former President of Ukraine Poroshenko. Three of them, one after another, have publicly admitted that they didn't go to fulfill Minsk agreements. They needed Minsk agreements just as a cover to rearm and reorganize Ukrainian army. And 8 years they were reorganizing and weaponing Ukrainian army. They were pumping arms into Ukraine, and finally Ukrainian army became the most numerical after Russian numerical army in Europe, and it became really a mighty force. And its operation to suppress the people of Donetsk and Lugansk was prepared. So we could not afford them to unleash genocide of Russian population in this region. So we had to help these people and to start this special military operation. As for the second part of your question about peaceful possibility of peaceful solution, well, any war is finally finished, usually is finally finished by a peaceful solution, peaceful agreement. But with whom? As you may remember, President of Ukraine, President Zelensky himself, has signed a decree prohibiting Ukraine, that means prohibiting himself, to conduct any negotiation with Russian President Putin. It's nonsense in the history of diplomacy and in history of international relation. And besides that, even if they wanted to start really genuine negotiation for the sake of peaceful solution, I'm not sure that they would have been allowed to conduct them. Remember last year meeting in Istanbul. At that time, the peaceful agreement was practically prepared. The peaceful solution was on the table. At the last moment, they called an order from over the ocean, and they said, no, we are leaving this negotiation room, taking the draft which was initially prepared by themselves. Well, of course, the peaceful solution will be earlier or later reached. But I'm not sure that it will be reached with the present authorities which are now in power in Kiev.
What's your message to Ethiopians upon the coming Easter festival?
I am happy that our two brotherly peoples are praising the Easter festival at the same day. It is another proof of the closeness of our peoples. And taking this opportunity, I would like to wish our Ethiopian friends, our Ethiopian brothers and sisters, peace in their country, peace in their house, peace in their souls and hearts. All the best for you on this holy day of Easter.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for giving us your time. Viewers, this was all what we have with Ambassador Evgeny Petaryohin. And stay tuned with other programs from Fana Broadcasting Corporate. Happy Easter.